Hey everyone, it's Ivan, kitbadger.com, out here to tell you about my first experience shooting in the NRL Hunter series out in Vernal, Utah at the High Desert Match. As things sometimes happen in my life, pretty fast and loose, this being one of them, I was actually headed down to southern Idaho to go do some shooting at a buddy of mine's, Joker's Wild Outdoors, amazing property down there. I was going to go basically do some shooting with 22s, both a rimfire as well as pretty amazing air gun I have, just doing some squirrel hunting. And so I knew I was going to be down basically already halfway to Salt Lake. So I called up my buddy, Matt Yore of Sawtooth Rifles, and I was like, hey, what are you up to this weekend? I was thinking about maybe cruising down there because I didn't have to be home until Tuesday to pick up my boys. He was like, oh, I'm actually leaving Friday. I'm going to go shoot this NRL Hunter Match. I'm like, heard of it, don't really know what it is, but mind if I come with you? He's like, yeah, sure. So I'm like, hey, what do I need? Probably this many rounds, and yeah, just bring rangefinder, this and that. I'm like, cool, should have most of that stuff already. So I'm looking around, what gun should I bring? Largely dictated by what do I have ammo for sitting around somewhere. So I'm like, I actually have some 6 ARC ammo, so why don't I bring this gun? And at this point I wasn't even signed up, but I had to leave that morning to get down to southern Idaho to go do the other thing I was going to do. So I threw this gun in the vehicle along with my 22s, a bunch of ammo for it, and was like, cool, let's figure this out on the way. Got a hold of person running NRL Hunter, Travis, awesome guy, and said, hey, I'd like to come down and shoot this match. Here's what I have. And so we're talking back and forth. And as it turns out, I can't shoot the main match with this gun. Reason being, one, 6 ARC, little did I know, is actually not semi-spec. And I guess you have to have a semi-spec round. But more importantly, you have to meet a power factor. So while this makes the weight limits, part of the rules, if you haven't seen it before, one, I should already have up my loadout video. You can see all this stuff, how it did for me. Also, just about NRL Hunter and some of the rules. In that, one, there's a power factor. Two, you have a heavy as well as a light division. So sub 16 or sub 12 pounds. This gun set up without the mag, it's like 9 pounds flat, which is great. Of course, probably be even greater if just strap 3 pounds to it. Help with that recoil. But either way, I couldn't compete in the main division because of that power factor. So I'm like, yeah, I'll come shoot skills. Even though part of me, driven by ego, was like, I'd rather shoot in the main match, see where I stack up. It is definitely a good thing I shot in the skills division. So ended up going down there, meeting up with my buddy Matt after doing my stuff in southern Idaho. Met up with another buddy, Javier, and the day before the match went out to a range just to gather some data and confirm zeros, and yeah, did a little bit of shooting out there. And after we wrapped up there, hopped back in vehicles and headed up to Vernal, pretty sure that's how it's pronounced, over in Utah. Day one, we basically just got there in the afternoon and we registered. And something kind of interesting, different from other matches, is you need to come up with a power factor. So people would come, confirm zero if they wanted to on a zeroing board, and then figure out their power factor, because you have to have a real gun that actually recoils, not just a gamer gun with some wildcat like 6mm cartridge that doesn't recoil at all. So people were doing that, and then after that, pretty much went back to the hotel, showed up that next morning, and got into kind of the safety brief for the entire event.
So always keep your rifle pointed in a safe direction. Treat your
as soon as that wrapped up, you're out there on the range. And kind of cool the way it's set up as far as you have a squad that you start with, but you just basically flow through. So you don't have to wait for your squad to finish the stage to go to the next stage. And I was with my 2 buddies, so I basically followed them. And because I was actually in the skills division, it gave me the opportunity to go not only be able to watch what they were doing, but also be able to go up and film them and not be cheating. Because again, everything is a blind stage. So day one, I got crushed straight up on a number of different levels. and it being a blind stage. And part of me is like, oh, like I probably got this. I fairly confident in like my ability to shoot, range targets, all that stuff. Like I'm decent at glassing and spotting stuff. Man, turns out I'm not on that competitive level anyway. And there were a number of things that gave me a really hard time that first day, a bunch of them. And some of it was honestly just ego driven. Like I said, feel confident, like, yeah, I can shoot. Done a bunch of shooting competitions, bunch of shooting competitions, stuff like that. Like, yeah, I should be good. I should be able to hang. Like, no. And so that was frustrating. I was having a really hard time just spotting targets. And some of it is a preconception also. There's actually a local match back home called the Jägermeister, the Hunt Master. Really fun local match that every year before hunting season, they put it on, and basically life-size targets anywhere from like 50 to 300 yards or something. And it'll be like a coyote or a moose head or a like deer or an elk or whatever. And then in the vitals, or for example, a moose head, not that you're gonna take a headshot at a moose, but there'll be vitals, usually about this big, that are hanging inside the silhouettes of these like otherwise life-size animals. So here I come up to this stage brief, which is one piece of paper, which cuts both ways. It's actually really nice versus like a 7-minute stage brief and you're like, wait, I gotta go here and then do, like, what? And the stage briefs are simple. 1 target, 4 positions, 2 targets from 2 positions, or 4 targets from 1 position. Did I say that? 1 target, 4 positions. Some combination of those. One of those 3 rather, every stage. So I get up and it's like, hey, 2 poppers, 2 positions. And I'm like, wait, we're shooting poppers? And it's like a pistol popper at like 350, 400 yards, just out in natural terrain in the brush. And I'm like, where is this thing? Or like a square, or these different things. And granted, and then some were like a Yeti. Granted, the Yeti is sideways walking, had like 350 yards, and it's only like that tall anyway. And so reduced targets. So in my mind, I'm just trying to make peace with this is what this is. Trying to reconcile like mentally, which for whatever reason I was having a hard time. Same hurdle of the tactical games. Oh, cool. Doing the tactical games. Oh, this is CrossFit with some shooting. Oh, there's nothing tactical. We're wearing a weight vest. Again, just making peace with what it was, which honestly I just had a hard time with on day 1. On top of that, going through and shooting and like getting some zeros out of 8. 8 is like the max score you can get on any stage. And getting a bunch of zeros, like shooting and missing, or just not being able to find targets. And so part of it is also this self-induced stress and frustration in that, hey, I'm here to do the thing because 1, I want to have the experience. That's part of it. But 2, I want to create content around the experience, in part as a backdrop for stuff I'm reviewing this gun, like whatever, bipod, something like that. And I can't even do the thing because I can't find the targets. And it was really frustrating. But somehow I got through day 1. And yeah, like day 1 was pretty rough. Day 2, I'm not saying I scored a ton better, but it was a much better, much more fun experience. And part of it was overnight making peace with this is what NRL Hunter is. I'm not going to be glassing for a full-size animal. That said, I think there was actually some full-size like bear targets. Granted, I ranged one at like 850 and the other at like 800, but largely cool. I'm looking for 4 circles out here in this range fan somewhere in the brush. Maybe they got painted a few days ago and now they're lead colored. So let's do this thing. And so honestly, just kind of making peace with that. And then also understanding that 1, that is the game, and hey, here's how you play the game. So day 1, there were some things I definitely didn't understand, like rules wise. And so I'm like, man, economy in motion, like, why don't I keep my bipod down when I run up so I can just ground my gun on the bipod? That saves time. Or with my tripod, why don't I keep this thing like a giant antenna with at least one leg extended so that when I get up, it's easier to just set up? Well, come to find out in the rules, I find out that night, my buddies corrected me. They're like, oh yeah, everything needs to start stowed. So I'm like, oh, okay, noted, moving forward. And day one was also part of the difficulty I had. One, I didn't bring binos. And the rangefinder I have is 7 by 24 or whatever it is. SIG, Kilo 5, works pretty good. But I was trying to use binos because they're definitely better for spotting than that 7X rangefinder. But personally, with my eyes, prescription, stuff like that, binos honestly don't work very well for me. And so I was trying to make those work. So I'm trying to find the target the first time, and then, or all the targets with binos on day one. Now I'm trying to find the target, reacquire the target again with my rangefinder so I can get my range and figure out a ballistic solution. Now I'm moving to the actual shooting position, which is not the position where you're finding your targets. And now I need to go find it a third time. So there was a lot of steps in there. Day two, I was like, I'm gonna bring the binos. I'm gonna try and just do it with my rangefinder. And fortunately, being in skills, I was able to ask for help if and when I needed help, which a lot of stages I did, like, hey, I can see this one here, and they would walk me into the other ones, which I'm really grateful for. More on that in a minute. And it was fun. I went through, I shot it. Again, I'm like, okay, this is the game. Like, I need to do this. And also part of it too, coming from other shooting competitions where you see all the targets out there, and then eventually you go shoot your stage. And even if it's a blind stage, when I turn this corner, there's going to be a silhouette at 15 yards and like a reduced BC at like 12 yards, like whatever. Like, they're going to be perfectly visible. Whereas this, you need to glass, which is a very valid hunting skill. And so it's easy to just get wrapped up in like, where is this thing? Just within your left and right lateral limits, just trying to find this thing, and you're just getting lost. Whereas finally day two, understanding the game, I'm like, oh yeah, like I need a glass. Here's my left limit, I'm gonna work left to right, and I'm basically gonna just pie this off and find my targets. Again, night and day difference from day one to day two. But yeah, really challenging, at the same time, really fun. Over the course of those 2 days, so many opportunities for personal growth, and I learned a ton. It's one of those where oftentimes we live in our head, and especially if you don't really have a good understanding of what you're walking into, you maybe come into it with some confidence that is unwarranted. And honestly, competition in general is pretty humbling, which is why a lot of people, especially in the tactical space, I don't do that, I'm gonna get a training scar. And you're like, oh, really? Is that why you don't do that? Or does your ego keep you from doing that? Because if you can't differentiate that at the end of the stage, I need to unload and show clear, or I need to drop my magazine and take a low probability shot for the sake of the competition so that I end up with a safe empty rifle so that I can safely move to another position. Like, if you can't wrap your head around that, like, really, is that where the training scar is going to come from? Nah, it's probably ego. And when you put yourself out there, very quickly you find out like, oh, maybe you're not as good as you thought you were. And well, like I said, I feel like I'm a pretty good shooter. I got crushed, man. I absolutely did. And just didn't realize what the game was, and then finally started to understand it, but then it was frankly still hard. Low probability shots, like not big targets. Generally, probably all of them were about 1.5 MOA, I would say. So as long as you and your gun are capable of that, 1 MOA all day long, then you're actually good to go, which honestly, most people are not capable of 1 MOA all day long, especially when you have environmentals like wind. And speaking of wind, on day two, pretty much sustained 20, 25 mile an hour winds, gusting up to 30 or 40 miles an hour, full value. So I was shooting out at that, like I said, the bear, I guess, at around 850, and then another one around 800, I think. Yeah, just holding, I don't know, 4 mils left for wind to get an impact, like a lot of wind to contend with. And then even at those closer distances where the target's that much smaller, even though it's only 250 yards, yeah, very easy to miss those targets. So yeah, it was challenging, as demonstrated by my amazing scorecard right here. Stage 1, 5, stage 2, 0, stage 3, 0, stage 4, 1, stage 5, 0, stage 6, 8. Actually cleaned that, which was amazing. And that was actually the first stage I shot on day 2 before the wind picked up. That was a nice confidence boost. Stage 7, 6, awesome. 0, 3, 6, 2, 2, 6, 6, 4, 2, 3, 0, 3, 0. Ugh, there's a lot of zeros in there. Total points, 57. Total possible, if you clean everything, 160. Ouch, right? Overall in the match, I think I came in like 61st out of probably like 90 something. I can't remember. And then unfortunately, I didn't really get to see where I placed in the skills division. Well, I did. I came in second out of 6 people. There were actually another 10 and none of their scores were recorded. Reason being, which is actually really cool for them, I ended up, as I mentioned, I went and shot with my friends. So my buddy Matt, as well as friend Javier. And it was really cool getting to go through and watch my friends shoot it, get some video of them shooting, and really just watch kind of like, oh, hey, here's best practice. Like, hey, get a laser range finding binoculars. So that is a huge advantage rather than trying to go from binoculars to a laser rangefinder, or even things like, you should probably have an arm board. So get your data, put it on your arm board, and now you're not guessing. And basically, I'm saying, oh, that's 527 yards. Well, according to this, 500 is 3 mils, 550 is 3.6. I'll hold like 3.3. Rather than doing that, actually having the true dope so you can like legitimately just dial, which I was not doing, largely just kind of winging it based off of 50 meter increments, 50 yard increments rather, or even just seeing how gear is carried as far as like, oh, probably best practice actually just have your bipod or your tripod slung, or even watching different shooting positions and stuff like that. It was great to watch my friends shoot. Awesome experience. But also the experience that I did not get there, which was really cool. I'm not sure how many matches they do it for, but they had like, I think 2 of the very top shooters. I know one of the guy, he like cleaned the whole match, like won it, I think in the factory division. Like professional shooters, they were like, oh, hey, who's here with skills? Come with us. And so they basically broke off those 10 other people in the skills division, aside from the 6 of us that were shooting there. They took those group of 10, broke them into 5 and 5, and they went through and basically coached them and shot through the entire match, which is really cool. But they didn't have a tablet, so their scores weren't logged, which is why I came in second out of 6 that got logged. Really, I came in way down though when you look at the overall rankings. All of that said, amazing match. I absolutely will probably do another one. Incredibly humbling. One thing I will say that largely just kind of makes or breaks a stage is having a really good RO there. And when I say like what makes a RO really good, one is some of the ROs were really good because they're also competitive shooters that compete in that space. So they know exactly the feedback they want being in that space. And they're also just really knowledgeable, really cool, really welcoming, to where I would roll up and I'd be like, hey man, I'm a skill shooter. And they're like, oh, cool. Like, glad to have you out here. How can we help? Like, how much help do you want? Do you want me to spot like impacts for you? Or not spot impacts, but do you want me to give corrections for misses? Like, let me know what you need. And I'm like, oh, awesome, thanks. And I'll be like, I'm gonna go probably give it 20 seconds. And if I'm not seeing it, I'm probably gonna ask for help on finding the target. And they're like, cool, we got you. And they're really good at like walking you into the target or giving you a correction. Be like, hey, you hit like left 0.5 mils and high about 0.2 mils. Cool, usable information. I can follow up with a good hit. And also calling out things loud, like impact or re-engage or move on, whatever it may be. And not that like there were bad ROs there, but the really good ones actually really stood out to me as really helpful, especially in that skills division. And incredibly grateful for those guys. Like they made it more fun because they made me consequently more successful. But yeah, I definitely want to go back, do another one. Will I shoot it in skills again, or will I shoot the main match? I will now that there was the epiphany overnight in the hotel, sleeping in a sleeping bag on the floor, because I was a straggler coming over with my friends. And I understand the game now. Like, I get it. It makes sense to me. Cool, let's do this. I think I will probably do it, which will make it honestly way harder than it was this last time, which was very hard. But now that I kind of understand it, it makes more sense. Cool, blind stage, need a glass, need to get a ballistic solution, and then need to get those hits. But overall, incredible time. Who do I think this is good for? Well, honestly, anyone, because it's pretty humbling and it's usually pretty good to get humbled. Anyone that hunts, especially out west, I think it's really valuable. If you watch my video on just like NRL Hunter, I speak to it, but it's valuable because it's a legitimate competition that is an analog. And even the parts of it where it's like, hey, the meta is have a tripod slung with your range finding binos on it, and like all of these little kind of tips and tricks, those are still best practices when you're hunting. And I get it, if you hunt back east and you're in a tree stand and there's a game trail 25 yards from you, this will be incredibly humbling. And it's also maybe not that applicable other than maybe the sport of shooting. But if you hunt anywhere where it's open at all, really applicable to actually hunting. You have a 4-minute par time, and in that 4 minutes, you need to glass and find targets, which hunting out west, more time than anything is just spent on glass, on binos, glassing. And then after you get that, get your ballistic solution, and then go make a good shot at a low probability target, like small, think vitals. And granted, probably not going to take a shot at like 850 yards at a bear. It's a competition. And so the idea being, though, is through this competition, sharpen skills and come away with it with a confidence in knowing what your actual ethical ability is with your equipment that hopefully is the same stuff you're hunting with, maybe not just a competition rig. And even as a competition rig, largely you get rid of the game guns because of the rules as mentioned. But overall, pretty rad time. There'll be a link down below if you want to go check out some of the NRL Hunter stuff. And yeah, as always, thanks for joining us at kitbadger.com. Look forward to seeing you next time.